G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. Standing out in the middle of my neighbour's sheep farm. Thought we might have a little bit of a look at Kurrajong trees. Therefore, we're in the sheep farm so I can show you a Kurrajong tree standing on its own. A fairly young Kurrajong tree, maybe 120, 150 years old. Having some of its bark rubbed off it by sheep, but you know, that's kind of like the size of it. No carvings or marks in the Kurrajong tree, but beside it, what we see here is a bit of a date marker. There you can see the dead skeleton of the original sapling. The radial regrowth has come up around that sapling, and then there is the axe cut through which poison was injected and this sapling was killed. That's perhaps 1970s, and whoever did that job recognised that this was a Kurrajong tree and left it here. It's a very productive Kurrajong tree too, as you can see by the seed pods decorating the ground, with some pods still hanging on the tree. Those seeds, and you get them in condition, there's something like 40% fat, 19% protein, and they've got higher caffeine content than coffee. So traditionally people used to roast them and grind them and put them into dampers and stuff. Thing is, when you're roasting them, you've got to be careful because you roast them to get the hairs off them, but if you get the smoke of the burning hairs in your eyes, apparently you go blind. And I'm told the blindness is permanent. However, there's another thing you can do good with this tree. The seed pods themselves, when they're in a greener state than this, I've heard on the radio that if you take the seed pods and you pound them, this is just the outside pod without the seeds, pound the seed pods, wood against wood I guess, put them into a fine mesh bag, put the mesh bag full of the seed pods in the running water for 5 days, and that will leach the poisonous, I think it's alkaloids, out of the outside of the seed pod. And then you can take the sort of resulting stringy fibrous mass, I think you wrap it up and let it ferment for a bit, and then you bake it, and then you wrap it up in paperbark. And if you've got a cave with a dry ledge or inside of a hollow tree or somewhere where you can store it out of the rain, Kurrajong seed pod bread has a shelf life of 6 months. So I've heard on the radio. I've never tried doing it. The wood itself is an easy carving softwood that on drying cures quite hard. Under the bark there's long strong fibres by the yard. So if you need a bag or a net you crave, you come to the Kurrajong tree. And you can get a feed out of it 5 different ways. So there are 44 Kurrajong trees in this gully between here and the top of the ridge, Hinkler Hill it is, and 36 of them are on the block of land that I pay rates on. So now that you understand why for a Kurrajong tree is a really good thing, a sacred tree in times of strife, let's go and have a look at some of the other Kurrajong trees. See if I can't show you some that are older than the sheep and potato brigade's existence on Australia. Now, as I've said in previous videos, this place didn't always look like this. What's missing from here is about 3 metres of topsoil, which fell off during the mass wasting in the 1880s, which happened after a really heavy rainfall season. The heavy rain came after there'd been a really violently, viciously fierce fire, and the viciously fierce fire came after the country had been overgrazed, and it had been overgrazed after and while it was being ring-barked, and it was being ring-barked by ex-miners, Chinese miners, after the gold rush had sort of moved through this area and played out. The sheep farmers paid Chinese to run around shepherding mobs of sheep and ring-barking the trees. So that's what caused the mass wasting. The country behind me, it looks, to somebody who hasn't paid attention and doesn't know what to look for, it looks like it's virgin bush. It's not, it's regrowth. There's no trees in there, apart from some Kurrajongs I'm going to show you, no trees in there that's older than about 180 years old. The difference here is that on the right-hand side of the fence there's water, permanent water in dams, so sheep farming operations can be conducted, whereas over here there's no permanent water, so there's no livestock. So this has had a chance to grow back. When you look up at what appears to be a big old tree, what you can see is radial regrowth around the dead skeleton of a tree which was burnt in the hellaciously big bushfires in 1958. Here's another one where the tree's actually finally given up the ghost. That shows you the burnt dead skeleton with a thin circumferential ring of regrowth around it. Axe cut, weathered stump, radial regrowth on a previous sucker, and that's been pulled out by a bullock team. What we have here is increased rotting where the ring barking scar was. Up there we have a dead skeleton inside with perhaps 100 years worth of regrowth, and it's all a coppice on an old stump which has been cut 150 to 180 years ago, yeah. Hollow, cut it halfway through with an axe and then they gave up because it had a dead sapling inside. Similar story here. This is something pretty rare, I'm not entirely certain, but I suspect that what this is a strangler vine. I don't know whether it's a strangler fig or just a strangler vine, but it's sure making a meal out of these trees and it's starting to spread across the canopy. So I might have to find out and talk to somebody who knows. Either it has to be preserved because it's the last of a disappearing local species, or it has to be killed because it's the first of a horrible new invader. Time will tell, but here we can see the top line of the ring barking scar coming around here, and there we've got actual axe marks. So this has been ring barked twice, it's a hollow tree, and then it's been cut off with a cross-cut saw. And instead of looking at all those rocks, just imagine that you can see this the way it used to be when there was a metre more topsoil. The ground was covered with native food plants and people used to live here free range. These wattle saplings, they make wattle seeds. Ever heard of wattle chino and wattle flower damper? Flax lily. You can eat the root of that, make pretty good baskets out of the fibres in the leaves too. A different flax lily, you eat the seeds and the base of the leaves, and again you can make baskets out of the leaves. Beard heath plants make nice little berries on odd occasions. Blady grass is related to sugar cane, it's just that the cane itself is underground and it's a terrible lot of digging to get in there, but yeah, you can make a meal out of blady grass underground stems. A different heath plant, different berries. Turning point marker left by the alpha male deer, pointing out that this is the limit of safe grazing because the edge effect on the sheep farm is out over there. And they can't believe that animals were automata, didn't have conscious thought processes. couldn't do abstract to it. What an idiot. Mukran. The bases of the flower cusps are really high in vitamin C. Sweet, almost bitter tasting. Here's a mukran. And there's a mukran flower. You eat the base of it. Pluck that out like that. The bit on top's the flower, the bit on the bottom is the base capsule that I've taken off. Pretty small. Then you hold the flower by the front of the petals, and that's the bit you bite off. And that's quite nice. The rest of the plant is really spiky and tough and leathery and nasty. Mukran, vitamin C. There's quite a lot of it if you pay attention. And here, of course, is the pick of the litter. Trachy-mean incisor, wild native parsnip. Good value, but you do have to dig for them. Now I know where we can wash that. Here's a much bigger one there. But this one should be enough. It's probably about 4 or 5 years old in this poor, stony, rocky country. Look at that. We have a waterhole. And up there is a Kurrajong tree. And once upon a time, when there was topsoil here, light fluffy topsoil, the hydrology was different to Europe. Instead of running away overland, the water would have been coming through the soil. And it would be oozing into the pond. Just like it is there on that moss. So let's go a bit further down the creek to where the water is still running. Where we can wash our wild native parsnip. And now the dirt's off, well, now I can eat them. Sweet, fragrant, juicy, aromatic. The funny thing is, each one of them has a slightly different leaf shape, and each one of them tastes slightly different. Genetic diversity. And now, look what we see when we turn around and away from the waterhole. And we look over there, we see Kurrajong trees. We see Kurrajong trees which are really big and really old and really carved. That's right, we have carved Kurrajong trees beside the waterhole to process the Kurrajong seed pods into bread. According to the Land Council's archaeology team, this is a territorial boundary marker. It also happens to be pointing exactly directly towards the next stand of carved Kurrajong trees out there on the horizon. And as you can see, half of this tree is missing. But if we come around to this side, there's another carving. There it is. This is on the Ngurrabal side of the tree. Other one is on the Bundjalung side of the tree. Here's a carving that starts here, runs across here and has a number of vertical marks. I fancied I could see 5 of them. Last time I spent a long time looking. This has a kind of a triangular affair. Here's another eye mark for climbing up the trunk to get to the seed pods. And there's an interesting thing. The landscape is actually using a dead tree to prop up this ancient carved Kurrajong tree with what may be a recipe on the base of it. here beside the territorial boundary marker, or the bit that points the way the rest of the tribe went. But anyway, these are on the land that I pay rates for them. So I'm a tree hugger with a carved Kurrajong tree or two. Ciao.